There's no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There's no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They have together become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. And in these few verses is an indication that the whole of our inner being is controlled by sin. It's not something we do, it's who we are. Our minds, our hearts, our wills. Now, righteousness here refers to our legal standing before God. Sin has ruined our legal standing before God. When everything is known about who you are and who I am, none of us is going to be in a good place. When the secrets are exposed, it is terrible for everyone. No one seeks God. No one understands. Sin wraps our minds, so we are unable to understand the things of God. Nobody does good. No one seeks God. Nobody prompted by their own decision, acting in their own ability, wants to find God. Anyone who is truly seeking after God does so because they're being sought by Him. It's the Spirit that leads Himself, because the Spirit is a person. It's not an object or a force. It's a person, and you have a personal relationship with people, not objects and forces. And so the Spirit draws Himself to you. You're not here by accident. In fact, last week we had a story of someone who was being drawn, and the Spirit was pursuing this person to the instance of they were driving on Old Jacksonville Highway and pulled into our church. They had a long conversation with our student pastor, and in that moment, this person said yes to Jesus for the very first time. They weren't just driving on Old Jacksonville Highway and said, you know what, that steeple, there's something about that steeple. I want to come in and know who the architect was that built that steeple. But in reality, God is the architect of our life. He created you with a purpose. He knows you by name. He has a plan for your life. And you were created to be in a relationship with Him. And He pursues after you. You're not here by accident this morning. Whether you find yourself in this room for the first time, or this has been your church home for multiple years, God is in the business of always pursuing and drawing Himself to you. Well, I thought I was created in the image of God, David. I thought I was a beautiful person. I was special. You are. You are created in the image of God. You are chosen. You do have a purpose. God has a plan for you, but you are ruined by sin. It's who you are. It's like my great friend and theologian Kent Faulkner said last week on social media. Without the bad news, the good news is not needed. The bad news is you are corrupted by sin. It is who you are, but it gets worse. It gets worse. Verse 13. Their throats are open graves. Their tongues practice deceit. The poison of vipers is on their lips. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed what? Blood. Because when there's blood, there's purpose. Ruin and misery mark their ways. In the way of peace, they do not know. There's no fear of God in their eyes. Now, the language that is used here to explain sin and who we are is much worse than what we anticipate. In fact, Paul here gives an X-ray study of us from head to toe. From you, from head to toe. From me, head to toe. And our words carry about the stench of death. Jesus said that by our words alone we are condemned. Our thoughts, what we think, we don't even say. Imagine if we just had a recorder that just followed us around and just recorded every thought that came in our mind. Goodness help us all, right? Our eyes, our feet, all go against God. And sometimes God's people and even our culture see themselves as good people. They just make mistakes sometimes. We see ourselves, David, at the end of the day, I'm a good person. I just make a mistake every once in a while. But can I tell you something? You're not. You're not. There is nothing in you that's good. Nothing. You are corrupted by sin. You are sin. You don't draw near to God. You have no desire to draw near to God. Nothing about you is good. And I want you to write this down because it's going to help make the case this morning of what Paul is saying in Romans 3 is this. Sin is not so much as an action as it is a condition. Sin is not so much an action as it is a condition. Many people think of sin as bad actions that we do. For an example, murder, stealing, lying, gossiping, actions. But Paul's analysis is much more devastating in Romans 3. The sin we do is because of the hearts we possess. For an example, I'm going to use this illustration. It's like being sick. You're not sick because you show symptoms. You show symptoms because you're sick. You don't have a flu because you cough and you sneeze and you have a fever. You cough, sneeze, and have a fever because you have the flu. And what Paul is trying to make it very clear in this is this, and I want to encourage you with this. It's not really encouraging, but we're not sinners because we sin. We sin because we are sinners. It's a condition. It's who you are. It's your heart. It's everything about you. But one of the biggest transitions we see in all of Scripture happens in the middle of Romans 3. With all the bad news, with all the weight of sin, of who you are and who I am, there's something that bridges the gap in the middle of Romans 3, and we see it, and we see these two words. In reality, we see but God. And God's not going to change us by the law. He's going to do it a different way, and it says this in verse 21. But now, apart from the law of righteousness of God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. This righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There is no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We're not going to be made righteous by doing anything, because there's nothing you can do to enter right standing back to God because you are sin. We're going to be made righteous by believing this good news, the great announcement that Jesus kept the law in our place, and he lived a life that we were supposed to live and paid the price and died on the cross that was meant for us. All the law can do is point us to a mirror that reveals who we really are. Now, a lot of us are really good at playing the games, including me sometimes. We all come into church with our church clothes. We wear our masks that we know we're supposed to have our lives all figured out. We get home, we take our church clothes off, and we look ourselves in the mirror, and we truly see who we really are. The thoughts that no one sees or hears. the secrets that nobody knows about because we're sin and we're corrupt. And this is bad news, but this bad news that points to some good news. In verse 24, all are justified freely by His grace through the redemption that came by Jesus Christ. God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of blood to be received by faith. He did this to demonstrate His righteousness because in His forbearance, He had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He did it to demonstrate His righteousness at the present time, so as to be just and the one who justifies those who have faith in Jesus. Now, for the rest of our time this morning, there's 3 words that I want us to identify in this passage of Scripture. Because there's some bad news that we are sin. We're corrupt. Our hearts, everything about us is sin. And that separates us from a perfect and holy God. But there's some good news. And there's 3 better words that I want us to identify and I want us to walk through this morning. And my prayer this morning is that you see this in a whole different light. Maybe it rings true, maybe just a little bit more this morning. But as we walk through this, I want you to have confidence in who Jesus Christ is in your life. The first word I want us to see is this word justified. Justified. Now, justification is not a process whereby we become righteous. It's not. It's not a process where we become righteous. Justification is a pronouncement whereby we are declared righteous all at once. That's what justification is. In fact, you can write this down. Justification is a declaration of righteousness. It's a declaration of righteousness. In justification, God's righteousness is not infused in us, it's credited to us. One of my favorite TV reality shows right now that Catherine and I are binge watching is Lincoln Lawyer. Okay? It'd be like me walking into a courtroom being accused of a crime. And the jury decides that I am innocent of all charges, and the judge declares me not guilty. I am cleared all at once. I am justified. He's not going to give me a 7-step process program through which I can become innocent. But He declares me innocent all at once, and I walk out those doors, walk out of that courtroom a free man. Justified. This was a picture in the Old Testament process of a sacrifice. Sin demands a sacrifice, and blood must be shed for our sins. And so what would happen would be as the Day of Atonement, all is waiting. I picture thousands of people walking or just watching at this road or at this gate as the high priest comes in, and this lamb, unblemished lamb, was put on this altar, and the blood of that lamb that was shed for every single person. The Day of Atonement, where you were justified, where you were free, where you could walk out of that moment and all the sins of that year, you were free. And I picture and I look at that moment in the Old Testament, and a certain realization requires an appropriate response. That realization of that moment, put yourself in their shoes. This happened once a year. Blood was shed for your sin, your thoughts, your wickedness, your heart. And at that moment, when that moment happened, there was celebration. There was freedom. You were justified. You were dancing. You were excited. You were free. And that symbol of the blood of that lamb, which is what John the Baptist would say in the New Testament, the great lamb was to come. And the sins of the entire human race was laid on him at the cross. Not the lamb at the Day of Atonement, but Jesus at the cross. Jesus became the murderer. He became the thief. He became the adulterer. Jesus became the teenage girl that runs away from home and lies to her parents. He became a hypocrite living a double life. He became the drunkard. He became those things and died for them so I could be innocent of them. Justified. My sin became his, and his righteousness became mine. Justification, justified. It's a better word. The second better word that we see in this passage is a word called redemption. Redemption. Redeem means to buy something back. It means to bring it back from destruction. It means to restore it. And we use the word in many different ways. One of my favorite illustrations of this word is by the great comedy movie. Has a lot of theological principles in it called Dumb and Dumber. And in this movie, it's dumb from the very beginning to the end, all right? In this movie, Lloyd does a lot of dumb things, but Lloyd trades in his van for a moped. And Harry finds out about it. And Harry looks at Lloyd and says, and I quote, "And I thought at that moment that you couldn't get any dumber. You go ahead and do something like this and totally redeem yourself." Right? Some of you just need to go home and watch Dumb and Dumber for homework. I mean, it's just what you need. This word is used for people that do a lot of coupons. Anybody coupon? I worked at a grocery store for many years in high school and college, and from stocking shelves to being a cashier. And I remember, and you might be one of these, that I used to collect sports cards as a kid. So I would have these massive binders of basketball cards, baseball cards, football cards. And I still have them, and I'm going to give them to my kids when they get older. But there would be people that would walk into Brookshire's with these massive binders full of coupons. And they would be in the grocery store, I swear, for 2 hours. And they would get to the cash register, and as soon as I saw that binder, I knew it was going to be a bad day. And they're walking through the coupons, and they're redeeming these coupons. Because when you trade in a coupon, you redeem it. You're giving cash equivalent for it. Every Friday after the gym, I like to enjoy a Smoothie King smoothie. I have a rewards program, and so every once in a while, I'll get an email or a QR code that gets me, and I can redeem something. And so that Friday morning, I get an email and says, you can redeem a free smoothie. Present this QR code at the cash register when you drive in or when you go inside. And so every Friday morning, I had a good workout. I'm on cloud 9. I get to Smoothie King, and I'm real excited because I know what's about to take place. And I order a 20-ounce Peanut Power Plus, but with chocolate. She says it's going to be $6.75. I said, all right. I drive through the window. She says $6.75. I said, normally on any given day it would be $6.75, but bam! Today it's free. I redeemed it, and I got a free smoothie. What did I pay for that? Absolutely nothing. What did the company pay for it? Full price. Jesus paid the full price to get us back, to redeem us. In fact, write this down. Redemption wasn't free. It cost Jesus everything. God presented Jesus as an atoning sacrifice in his blood. Some translations say this fancy word, propitiation, meaning God's wrath is satisfied. His claim against you is settled. Propitiation, meaning that God poured out on Jesus the righteous anger he had towards you and towards me. Because God is holy. The biggest attribute of God is that God is holy. He's perfect. And he can't be near sin. Because sin separates you from a holy God. It doesn't matter if you've made one mistake or 1,000 mistakes. Put that next to God, perfection, and it fails. It separates us. And when you love someone, you hate the things that destroy them. If you love someone that has cancer, you hate the cancer that is destroying them. And that's how God feels about sin. Sin destroys his creation. It separates you from a relationship with a perfect God, so he hates it. He hates the sin, and he's angry towards it. And so Jesus stepped in the way for it. Jesus stepped in the way of God's wrath towards you and towards me. He took it on himself. The blood that was shed in the Old Testament was just a symbol that would point to the blood of not something, but someone named Jesus Christ on the cross. The cross was not just showing God's love for us. He was taking the place of our punishment. And I want you to hear me. He didn't just die for you. He died instead of you. Redemption. Redeem. And then we see this word faith. Romans 3:26, the one who has faith in Jesus. Now, the Greek word for this in this translation is a word called pistis, which means to lean your weight on or join yourself to. It's not a blind leap into the dark, but faith is a commitment of yourself to someone based on what you know about the other person. It's a very similar situation as to marriage. You date someone, you get to know them, and at one point in time, you're willing to go all in. You're willing to make the vows. You're willing to say, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And although I don't know everything about you, I'm willing to go all in. And the same scenario is true with this word and when it means faith. You are joining yourself to him, the author and perfecter of your faith. He takes away your sin and you take his righteousness. He's already pursued you. You didn't just find him. You don't have to look for him. He's speaking to some of you right now in this room, in your heart and in your mind. He meets you right where you're at this morning, and the price of your sin is paid. It's finished. Tetelestai, as Jesus would say on the cross. One of the last words he would ever say. What Jesus offers you is much more than forgiveness, though. It's justification. And let me show you the difference. Okay, let me show you the difference. Forgiveness means this: you may go. You have been released from your penalty. You're forgiven. Justification means I want you to stay. You are welcome to all my love and presence. Big difference there. Knowledge of my justification leads me to so much more confidence in my life. I have a God that is fighting for me. I have a God that doesn't sleep and He doesn't slumber. He has prepared a table for me. And although some of you come into this room and you think, I'm not worthy to be in the presence of God, here's the thing, you're not. But because of the blood of Jesus Christ, you are worthy. He didn't just die for you, He died in your place. You are justified, you are redeemed, and by faith, you have a seat at the table of Jesus Christ. He has a purpose and a promise for me. He is a God that is more gracious than my sinfulness. And He won't leave me in my difficulties. This gospel, though, however, is much different than religion. Now remember, this law points us and puts us in the sight of a mirror to see everything of who you are, because you can hide and you can fake a lot of things. But when you see yourself in a mirror, you see who you truly are. The difference from religion and a relationship with Jesus Christ is much bigger and much more important than you would ever think or know. Religion is built on this premise: I obey, therefore I'm accepted. I obey, therefore I am accepted. But the premise of a relationship with Jesus Christ flips that around and says, I am accepted, therefore I obey. You are justified, you are redeemed, and by the blood and the faith in Jesus Christ, you are free. And you can have a relationship with Him. It's a gift, though, that you have to receive it. It's much more than just information, just like in Exodus 12. People knew that you were supposed to put the blood on the door frame because God was looking for the blood. But it's much more than information. It's about transformation. It's about applying and receiving this gift that Jesus Christ has not just done for you, but He did in your place. He atoned for it. He paid everything for it. And when you understand the reality of being justified, the reality of redemption, the reality of faith, when you think about Jesus' last moment and just the anxiety that Jesus faced right before He went to the cross, when He said, God, is there any other way? He understood the wrath of every single person's sin was going to be on Him, and God the Father couldn't even look at Him. His body that was beaten and bruised for you. His blood that was shed to give you a new life, to give you a new beginning, to give you a new purpose. It makes you look at things a little differently. And this morning, as we take the Lord's Supper together, my prayer is that you look at this a little differently. Maybe this morning it holds maybe just a little bit more weight to it. Because so many times we do this out of routine, it's a come and go. Instead of realizing everything that Jesus had to do for you and for me. And it was so strategic, it was so intentional, and it wasn't by accident. But have you received that gift? Has there been a moment in your life that you have said, David, I need that salvation? I don't just know about it. I know about God. I know about the cross, but I want to receive it. I want to receive the greatest news and the blood that had a purpose for my life. That's the only way salvation occurs, is when you receive it. And this morning, before we even go any further, for some of you maybe this morning, maybe this is ringing a little more real and the Spirit is speaking to you in a fresh and different way, and you need to receive that. So I'm going to ask all of us to bow our head and close our eyes this morning. In the stillness of this room, the quietness of your heart, maybe you're here for the first time. Maybe you've been coming for weeks, months. My question to you is not that you know about Jesus. I'm not asking that. I'm not asking you if you know about God. I'm not asking you about what you've done, because you bring nothing to the table. The only way you have a seat at the table is you receive the free gift that Jesus gave you. You're justified. You are redeemed. And by faith, through grace, Jesus can give you a new life, a new beginning. And for some of you this morning, you've been longing for that, and you need to receive it.